Great evening. Welcome to Why Should I Be Ashamed? I'm Sheila Calvert, your host. I am the author of the book, Why Should I Be Ashamed? And tonight we have a great guest, my great husband, A. Allen Calvert.
Well, hello everyone. It's so great to be here. Definitely great to be here with you. We're in for a treat tonight. It's always sparks always fly when my wife and I are together. Definitely want to send a shout out to everyone that's listening, and thank God for Broderick, the producer in the house, and to everyone that's in. Sign on, for she has something very serious to share. You don't want to miss it. So share it, send some likes out, and let someone know that we are about to go on in about 15 seconds.
Thank you so much. Thank you just for coming in every week, and we'll be right back with you shortly. Into your Facebook page and into your living rooms. We have a hot topic for you tonight. I just thought it was so great that we have Pastor Anthony, my husband, my confidant. We've been married for 30 years now. And so I wanted to talk about this topic tonight because it is so important. Often we address sexual abuse issues stemming from children. It could be men, it could be boys, it could be girls. We talk about just our whole community, a world of sexual abuse. And tonight, I just have some all the way live questions for Anthony. I asked him just to come off the cuffs. Don't try to go, because he's like an executive. He like to go and research and dig. But how can you research your intimate, true experience, your true feelings? So tonight we're going to talk about when your partner, your mate, your confidence, your wife, your husband has been sexual abused. I wanted to ask you a question tonight, Anthony. How did that impact your life? And of course, I will answer how it impacted my life from my perspective. But tonight, we're going to ask him, how did my sexual abuse, or being married to a woman that has been sexual abused as a child, how did that impact your life?
Well, first of all, I think how we were married put a lot of pressure on the whole thing. I wasn't prepared, nor do I know that anyone could be. So I meet you, you're saved, you love God. We don't have sex. We wait until we married. And after the honeymoon, we come together, and then you never told me these issues, right? So we're 10 years or more in the marriage, and you've only leaked little bits and bits. So probably at about the 15-year mark, you maybe told me half of it, if that. And so when I found that out, it was very difficult because I guess I struggled mostly not making it about me. That I think I really started to understand that some of the things that I'm doing that gets on your nerve is tied to people who probably had abused you before, and there's certain feelings. So it was very tough. It was, I had no one I could talk to about it because men don't want to share that their wives have been sexually abused. So if I would ever bring it up with preachers, they would never say, well, hey, my wife went through something similar. So I know no preachers that have a wife that went through what you went through, which I find that very ironic.
Well, wait a minute. We're talking about 30 years ago also, when it still is and it was taboo to have these sort of discussions. Now, from my perspective, I did share some things with Anthony, but I really feel like there was layers and layers because, like he said, I had previously been married for a short while to a gentleman, and the experiences and sharing the story oftentimes, and when I was young, I remember sharing the stories, and it seemed like it would come back to haunt you. So when I believe when we got married, I was just peeling layers and layers. I was no longer ashamed or taking responsibility. Thank you, responsibility for the experience that I had, nor was I blamed. But I did notice that when you're married to a sexual abuse partner, and especially a woman like me that is very verbal, I was spiritual, I was verbal, but it was not discussed in our church world. So this was something that I kind of shoved under the mat. But as I was explaining to him some of my sexual behavior, some of my sexual patterns, I also had to let him know where the root of this bad behavior, this dysfunction, stemmed from. And I think a lot of times, I think back then, years ago, as being an abused woman, I wanted to marry my hero. So I had an expectation because I had all these abandonment issues. And we ran into problems because I had abandonment issues and he brought issues to the marriage. Just because you're not sexually abused, it doesn't mean that you don't have some dysfunctions of your own.
Exactly.
And you needed some affirmation. And I had abandonment issue, you needed affirmation. So he's over there looking to be affirmed, and I'm over there somewhere looking for that hero. And you got two people that's needing something that the other one is not necessarily given to the other one, and it brought a lot of hurt. It brought a lot of I feel, well, I only can speak for myself, but it brought hurt when you expecting your husband to come and see about you, and he's over there trying to get seen about himself, because that was my so I wanted to marry my hero. I wanted to marry love. I wanted to marry gentleness. I wanted to marry spirituality. I wanted to marry kindness, respect, and so we had some battles with that. So
well, let me say this too, because you said you wanted a hero. I think in order for a man to be a hero in any aspect of the word, he has to know how to accomplish that. So if there's anything that I know that's lacking as far as men are concerned, there's no discussion. I just know from being in a family where there was abuse and it never been talked about. So imagine I'm now your husband. You want me to be a superhero in a way that I don't even know exists, that I wouldn't even know how to leap that tall building or to stop that train. I wouldn't know how. So now what you want me to be as a superhero is actually my kryptonite, because I could feel myself failing. Because every time you looked at me like I wasn't measuring up, I felt like I was failing, but I didn't know how to fix it because I had no one to compare it to, and no marginal experience from anyone else. And to be honest with you, I think I ran into some preachers and friends who had wives who had experienced it, but they were scared to share it.
What about you? What about you?
Well, I would talk about it from I wanted to say second person or third person. I would always talk about it. I would lead into it from a hypothetical sense to see how they feel. Every time I talked about your experience, people wanted to hear it. But after I finished talking, there was no more talking. So it wasn't like I said what we were going through and then they said, well, I've had some experience. Well, I know someone. It just was crickets.
Well, it really is today and still is taboo. When your partner is sexual abused, I'm gonna just talk about three things that they look for tonight, and you can share that with me. One thing, not looking for a superhero, but when I say I'm looking for a hero, I was looking for someone to stand in front of me and take any blow that came to me, any kind of blow, because I had been left abandoned. So if someone was going to step to me, I expected him to stand there and tell them no. If someone wanted to do anything, I expected him to take the brunt of the blows. So number one, I believe when a partner is sexually abused, they look for support. Support is so necessary, and there's different, I think it's going to differentiate depending on the woman or the man. There men too. Now you're hearing more men are beginning to verbalize it. They kind of spit it out like spit. I'm gonna just say this real quick, and they might run and talk about it. But one thing we look for is support. How do you feel then you supported me, and now? And we're talking 30 years, so I didn't necessarily know what I needed even as a wife or a woman that has been hurt or battered or abandoned or walked over. How do you feel you supported me then?
Well, I think, no, I don't think. I know for sure I didn't do a good job. You were left unprotected. Mainly, most of it was my fault.
What were you doing then?
What I was doing then, I think I was trying to get attention because I felt like, from what I knew of being married, I needed to show you and everyone else that I'm the man of the house, and that meant not just giving you tough love, but being this, not sergeant at arms, but being this person who's in control of his house. But I also liked the woman you were, so I didn't try to silence you, because the men who had those women who said, what kind of movie you like? Whatever kind of movie you like. Their life was boring. My life was exciting, so I didn't want to change that. But I failed in this regard, is that I was making what you was requiring of me about me instead of making it about you. So it was as if you was revealing to me how not a good husband I was, which got on my nerve, but you were saying, I'm just revealing to you what I need from you as my husband. So that was very confusing. So I failed miserably at the beginning.
So what would you say to a man today that, or a woman that came and say, hey, my partner just revealed to me that they have been sexually abused. What would you say to them after 30 years? How would you say they could support that relationship?
I would first begin to tell them and I have talked to some men, so I'm gonna just give it to you how I gave it to them. I began to well up as if to say, I feel so bad for you. And here's why. So I had some men to finally, after all these years we've been married, to say, hey, I'm dealing with a woman that's been abused, that's went through abuse. And I look at these men and say, oh man, you are in for a wild ride, because now you can't be the man that you are. Because God has yoked you up with a person that you really have some needs you need to fulfill, and it's your job to make sure that your wife is secure. So I failed miserably at that at first, because I thought I could be as not as loose, but I thought I could be myself. And if your security hung in the balance, I figured you're a big girl, you'll get it, you'll grow up. But it was my job to build that security in you. So
What do you mean by be yourself?
Myself, I was
Loose and wild and attention seeking. Let's just put it where it goes. He wanted to be loose, wild, attention seeking, all over the place.
That is not what I'm talking about.
What about, okay, for instance, we would have big, beautiful banquets.
Oh God.
And I would be fabulous. And I'm thinking I'm on a date because I had never went to prom. So you have all this emotional stuff bottled up. So I get this beautiful, beautiful dress, and I'm thinking, okay, this, in my mind, this is almost like prom. We get to the prom, or to the banquet, he sits me down and he flamboyant all over the place. And I'm thinking, where is my husband? And he's over there like he at the nightclub. This is a church function. So cause I'm sure there are couples that deal with it and they wonder, what's wrong with them? And when he would pull away and go off to himself or to table, and number one, he was a very social butterfly. Number two, he comes from a big family. He liked that, but he forgot that he had brought a date, and I'm not the club girl. That you're here to entertain me. And by the time he get back to the table, he has no juice left for me, nothing to talk about, and we're sitting there like two mummies. So and he didn't notice that at first. That was just the norm. And at first I was like in shock. And that bothered me so much. I really was like, did we just come on a date and he didn't bounce himself all over the...
What was you about to say?
I was about to say something my young kids say, bounce that tail, but we're not gonna say that. But do you remember how you could just go off?
Yes.
Have you a good old time?
I do remember, and it was because I felt like I could do that, because I was grown to do that. I felt secure in my marriage. However,
we wasn't married that long.
I know, but I knew I wanted you for the rest of my life. But you got to remember, there were some things you hadn't told me.
But do you have to tell a man that when he take you on a date, that he don't sit you to the table and go entertain everybody else? Is that a conversation that we need to have with gentlemen or a wife? So there we go, dealing with what I'm trying to show you all. I had abandonment issue. He had attention seeking issues. So those two wasn't working. Now see, if he had a notice, and then when I would try to say, hey, we're here together, he felt, this is what I feel, I can't speak for him. He felt, you sit down here and I'll be back. You know, kind of the barefoot and pregnant syndrome. You gonna get pregnant, I'm gonna sit you down and I'll be back. And he would come back, but it's just that those moments in between was so kind of hurtful, because back to that support that I wanted I wanted that, I wanted my husband to be available for me, to be married to me, not to make the scene. And as years went on, I accepted it, and as years went on, he ran into some men that began to talk to him. I remember Bishop Stanley Frazier. He was the bishop's adjutant, and the bishop told him, go take care of your wife first, and then come and see about me. And I remember the moment when he came to see about me, I didn't mind sitting there then. You know, I just needed him to acknowledge when he said, honey, do you need anything? Do you want to go to your car? Because I'm getting ready to take the bishop to his car. And when that moment came in our life, I think that changed our marriage, because I think Bishop was trying to teach you the value of the priority. And I am your wife, your relationship. That should be your priority. Doesn't matter who's in the room. Your person needs to know by your eye contact, you're the most important person. You're the most important person in the room.
Well, and before we move, because I want to say something to that, because and I'm glad Broderick is in here, because I just want the world to know that's listening to this, that even though I failed miserably by focusing, giving you the right attention, I do want it to be known that it was going to be virtually impossible for me without some conversations to get the gravity of what you needed. So, let me say that by saying this. First of all, we have a 10-year...
You're making it virtually impossible. No,
No.
That's too much excuse. You marry a person, when you come into a relationship...
I thought I was just talking.
I know, but you go to these extremes, and you gotta really come on and just be broken here and be honest. You just, I'm being honest.
I am, if you would let me finish.
Okay,
but,
virtually impossible.
And here's why. Here's what I mean by that. It's because there were some things that you required from me that you didn't even let me know you required. And I don't know what took you so long to tell me, or what took you so long, but I do remember when you started to tell me that I began to feel terrible about it. And that was a huge change, because that was the only thing I think that really made me start to change as far as it was pertaining to you. Yes, I was young. Yes, I was all over the place. Yes, I was used to having attention, and I didn't see nothing wrong with getting my little juice cup at the church event and going work in the room and saying hi to people and leaving my wife sitting. But I was fresh out the club when I married you, and now I'm trying to be saved. Fresh out the club. Now I'm saved, married with a wife and kids.
I ain't gonna leave you. Just relax a little bit.
I know you better not leave me.
Calm down a little bit.
But I'm just saying, that was very tough. Very tough.
I realize it really was tough. There's a question on the floor. How long did you wait to tell Pastor of your experiences?
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, I cannot remember, but all I know is I was always a very straight, honest person, brutally honest. No secret, hold nothing back. It was no secret. Because I knew I told him, because I remember him telling me, oh, there's no abuse in my family. And I looked at him like,
No, I didn't say abuse. I said there's no
sexual abuse.
Yeah.
So that was very early in our marriage for us to have this discussion. But see, now he don't remember.
I do. I do, and I want to hold you to some truth here, because
hold me to truth. I'm not lying.
I didn't say it. No, I want to hold you to truth in this regard, is that it was not early in our marriage. You told me as an umbrella what it felt like.
He wasn't listening, y'all.
Listen.
He wasn't listening.
Listen, you didn't go into detail. You told me in an umbrella what it felt like to be in a room where a man was with your mom, but he's always looking at y'all. I never knew he got a hold to you, right? This was like because this man got sick, and we went over and took him a TV. I was in the mindset at that age, I wouldn't have took that man nothing.
That was years later.
That was years later, but I'm just saying, I didn't know then. We were married almost 10 years when we took him to TV. And
So what I'm gonna say to you gentlemen, listen, you gotta listen, and I think sometimes we're not paying attention and we're not listening to our companions, and even when they blurt out something, you may, because one of my loved ones told me about their abuse, and then later on they came back and say, well you laughed, and I remember kind of laughing it off because I was in shock. And sometimes we're not listening, and I want to say to you all out there, make sure that if someone come to you and bring up that subject, that you stop, sit down and say, hey, would you like to talk about it? And not let it be a thing that just go through your ears, out the, just kind of, a lot of times we are silent because we don't know what to do with it. But I had that discussion often back then with other people. That's when I began to start writing my book, years ago.
What year was that? What year was that?
What year was what?
That you started writing your book?
Before we came here to North Carolina. We're not here, you're not here trying to figure me out. We're here trying, because you didn't do that. We're here trying to help. So the question on the floor is, how do you support a companion that has been abused? And I would say, but I was writing it before we came here in 2004. That was when it was copyright. I wrote it I started writing it years before that. So support, and you see how we go back and forth, because the issue, there's a real issue here that we are trying to address, but oftentimes in relationships, people make it about them and not about the point that I'm trying to make to you all, is listen to your children, husband, wife. If they tell you they have been physically, if you see signs of your daughters, sons being physically abused, sit down and have a conversation, not a text message, not an email. Try to sit and have a conversation. One thing I can say that I realized early in my relationship, when I would just kind of stand down, that it was not his fault for what had happened to me. I just figured as life moves on, now you're gonna step into a place of concern and care and become a listener in my life, because that's the support that I can do. What was you gonna say?
I want to say.
You're sending some triggers right now.
I want to say this, and because I really want you to understand that you could talk to someone and they could say some things that are not explicit, and you will pick up and say, that person's been abused. It's because you had some like experiences and you know the lingo. There were some times you talked to me early in our marriage, and you were not explicit, and you gotta remember, I came from a family where I was totally in the dark about all of these kind of sexual abuses, and things like that, so I didn't pick up on them.
Could you tell us about you? You keep telling us about me.
No,
you
I'm
keep
telling
telling
you
about the
about
men
me.
at church.
I'm telling you about me.
You
If
tell
you
about
listen.
I wasn't explicit, but that mean what does that say about you?
I'm saying I missed it. I didn't know it was that as bad as it was. The stuff
So
in
you
this
didn't
book,
take it
I've
as
read through
serious.
your book one time, and it's tough for me to read it again.
It's tough for my sons to read it too.
It's tough for me
They
to read it
won't read
again
it.
because I was like, that is horrible. And so if I would have known this early in my marriage, I don't think you should have told me before I married you, because I don't know that I would have had the courage to still marry you, because that would have been too much.
Now he really talking crap. You really just talking.
Oh, I am?
Yeah, because I know I shared so many things with you about
Before we
yeah,
wrap?
about my sexuality,
No.
about stuff I was doing, stuff I had experienced. Yes, I did. But anyway,
Wow.
we're gonna move on. Um, One thing I can say that he did later on, as we began to peel back the layers and begin to talk, I remember the perpetrator, his daughter, asked me to take a television over to the house, and I had not gotten to explicit experiences with him, but I did tell him I was sexually abused on many occasions. Um, but I remember him years later saying, I wouldn't have never took that TV. See, I think it hit him later, the conversation that we was having, because later on he said, I wouldn't have never took him that television if I knew more explicit things that had happened. So from my perspective, I don't think he was hearing me. I think that, I don't know if he wanted to hear me, because it just wasn't a conversation that anybody was having. His family, most of our family. So I felt like I told him in the beginning. So he has his perspective. It's been 30 years. I have my perspective, and I know my experiences. So let's say, when did you in the past have had to be strong for me? And I'm trying to let you all know what you may have to do when you're dealing with people that have been abused. Of course, Anthony says he's never had a sexual abuse experience. He's never been abused physically or anything like that. So he really came into that relationship with me, and with a lot of my trauma, but I was also having a spiritual experience with God, which kind of took a lot of the edges off, you know, and a lot of times I just sit back and just watch things. But when did you feel you had to be strong for me? In what ways?
Well, I guess it really settled in on me. You had been writing your book, and you had told me a lot of things, and then you wouldn't tell all the details. I think I'm sort of glad you didn't, because when you did, I didn't know how to respond. So I felt the weight of it very early in our marriage, because I wanted to work so hard that you didn't have to work. And I remember when we started having our second group of kids, and we were on those last 3, and you were able to come home, I felt so rewarded. I thought a woman shouldn't spend any of her money on a bill unless the man just didn't have enough to pay them all. I thought a woman should be able to save her money, and a man should pay all the bills. He should pay all the car notes, everything. And of course, I'm not hearing any amens from Broderick in the studio here on this, but and so I felt like I was doing my part. But even though I was doing that part, I did realize it was something else you required of me that I wanted to give, but my only way to give it was either to go ghetto. I didn't have a knight in shining armor way of doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like I could go and do some damage to a person. I knew people, I had people, and we could do that. But then where would that put me as a preacher?
But that's not what I was looking for.
It's not, but that was the only thing I knew to do. It was like, I didn't know what's the clean way of putting a person in their place, rescuing your wife without cussing somebody out, without waving a pistol. You know, I really struggled with that, and so I just felt helpless. And I know it seems like I'm making it about me because you were the one who went through all of the suffering, but that was my big drawback. When something would happen, I felt like I needed to just go ballistic but that wasn't the answer, and so I felt, I don't know,
I
constricted.
think oftentimes husbands, sons, brothers, men, I think that is oftentimes their first response, because I have heard of women that had to stop their husbands with the gun, but I had been so far removed from the situation, that wasn't my issue. My issue was more emotional. How do I deal with this feeling of abandonment when you have a husband that is such a social butterfly? I love people, and then you have people that is constantly hitting me from the side and pretending like they really like us both. But they were constantly, even in the church world, they were doing ugly stuff to me when he wasn't present, and then when he's present, he's Mr. Nice Guy, and they're thinking that it's okay. And that kind of treatment was because he wasn't paying attention. He wasn't paying attention, and it really was a trick of the enemy to constantly attack me, constantly give me that abuse. And then I could look at him when I see him making friends with my enemies, then it would trigger something in me, and then I could feel mad at him. And that was a thing that we had to struggle with. Even oftentimes, sometimes in your families, they'll, they come and they attack one person. But we are in this thing together. All the battles that I went through, he had to go through with me. The battles that he went through, I had to go through with him. And we began, when listening became a part of our relationship, I think that's when the healing became, for me, emotional. I had asked you a question: when your partner is sexual abuse, how did you be strong for me? And number two, how does one respond? How should someone respond? Because we cannot go kill everybody. You can't go to prison because of a rapist. Why should you? And I know so many times men, they want to go kill somebody. We've seen things that happen over the years. You'll hear about it in the news. But how do you tell a man? How do you help a man today or a woman today that want to go get their gun and want to go attack and have that kind of response? What should their response be?
Ask it one more time. Please.
When your partner is sexual abuse, how do you respond?
Well, I do know I didn't respond correct. So I do know that. Now I know it should be a response of coverage. It should be a response of shelter. It should be a response of security. It should be a response of affirmation that it's not your spouse's or your partner's fault that they suffer that.
You never made me feel less than because of it. Even though sometimes I feel that people, like even my sons, they don't want to deal with it. I have a son that comes over. I'm like, why don't you come in the room? He just, Mom, I can't. My other son, Mom, I'll start reading your book. They just can't. But one thing, you didn't make me feel dirty. You didn't make me feel rejected. You never used it against me. You never said to me, you deserve it. And that's one thing. We should never use our pain and our stories. When someone shares their stories with you, that's why the atmospheres are so scary, because you don't want your companion to use that pain against you. You don't want your companion to be so hurt and say, well, that's why you got abused, or you liked it, or you deserved it. And that's one thing you should never, that should never be your response. So I think what happened for me is that you began to build me up in a sense of, it takes time. He caught it and he just began to love on me. He began to be protective of me, because that little girl had never been protected. And in order for me to grow up, even though I was strong, I wanted that protection. I wanted to be soft. I didn't want to be insecure, and when he starts saying to me, I have to make sure, even though my security is within myself, is within my strength, but when you're in a relationship, you want something from that relationship. And he began to say, it's my responsibility to make you feel secure. It's my responsibility to let you know it's going to be all right. It's my responsibility to care about you as your man, as your husband. What do you want me to do? And most of us don't want our husbands to go to prison because of some perpetrator or some foul person, and then they're locked up for life for their exchange in a position for something like that.
I also want you to share something on this, because I just remember this, that in the midst of all the failure, I just remember needing, I don't want to say, I didn't need a pat on the back, but I needed someone to talk to. Like there's a man out there right now, his wife has been, or his significant other has been abused or mistreated, and now when they are out in public, there were certain things that under normal conditions with a woman that hasn't been abused or haven't went through things, a man can act, can do. But then,
like what?
I mean,
you gotta make it plain, honey.
Well, I want to make it plain, because I remember you having to just tell me, hey, I'm just uncomfortable with you hugging right now. I just remember that being a huge psychological war, like you were trying to control
Never put
me.
them big old breasts up on you.
No, I wasn't. I knew how.
They don't hug to the side. They be trying to put them big old breasts up on the brother.
I knew how to hug.
I'm just kidding.
But here's the thing: whether the breast was on me or not, I think it was just a certain period in our marriage where you didn't want to see me hugging, and I didn't know how to respect that.
You know why? A lot of times at church, pastor and the men at church, they're hugging everybody, but you don't never see them hugging their wives, and I'm not having that. You're not hugging all the sisters at church, and for some reason in the black church, we be sitting there like, oh, he must really don't like her, and y'all don't even understand the man ain't in bondage, he's here by choice. But I didn't like the idea that the pastors or the men of God or whatever, they hug everybody, but you don't never see them hold their wife's hand. You never see them give their wives a hug. And I'm not getting hugs at church. Ain't nobody getting hugs at church. That's how I felt about it. Now, as far as being insecure, I've always been a pretty secure woman about my beauty and about how I feel about myself, but I just think there should be boundaries. And I think there's and I don't know how he started this train, and I'll ride with him too, but there should be boundaries. Every week, and I'm going to the car, I'm like, I'm gonna let you go and get your hug, I'm going to the car. That's how I felt about it. And the brethren, and Broderick, you can come on over here and talk about this, but the brethren don't never know how to say, honey, not today. See, my daughters, they will tell you in a minute, brother, ain't no sugar today. You got to, no, put your little slob in your day. But the brethren, I don't understand why they can't say, if they see a sister that is maybe over her boundaries, why can't he say, no, we're not, no, give her a handshake? And that's how I feel. If you can't stop the madness, then you don't need to be doing none of it. Don't let and that's the thing about being abused. Oftentimes when you've been abused, it seems like people try to take that territory, and they just try it. And then when I got the strength and I said, no, I'm not hugging today. I don't want no sugar. I don't want nothing today. I
think it's a very sensitive thing, because if a man is not mature enough to be able to separate himself from you telling him he can't hug or he can't shake a woman's hand, or I don't even want you talking to her, I know women can tell when a woman is after your husband. I know. Because I can tell when a man is after my wife.
Nobody be after me though. I'm so, copacetic and just mellow.
No, you got loose sometimes, but no, but I just think it would just. Let me give you a case in point.
And give us about you.
All right, I'm out, and you've already said you're uncomfortable with these things. I don't want you hugging or whatever. Now I'm out. Let me tell you what's going in my mind. I'm a grown man.
Go on and be single by
don't
yourself. Go on and be grown. Be grown. Be great.
Am I
And
not
good
talking?
life.
Am I not talking?
Yeah.
Am I talking?
Go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead.
So I'm thinking I'm a grown man. You don't give me all these limitations when we get ready to go out, and you don't let me know.
And you don't let a woman back you up in a corner either. Like I seen you running all the way back up in corners.
Can I finish my thought? You know what? I wish Pastor Harris was here because Broderick just don't say nothing when it's time.
Because he knows the truth.
But listen, so I would get to a place, and now I'm in a place where people are greeting, and I'm normally this person that greets. I know how to hug people, but now I got to remember, my wife has just shared some things with me, and my wife is not like everybody else's wife. That you require something from me that maybe other husbands are not required. I had to come to the point that I was okay with that. And for me, it took years of maturity to understand that I really don't care what people think. And if I don't hug someone or greet someone, especially if my wife doesn't feel comfortable or she can see a spirit, I ought to be able to accept that from you since I'm going to spend the rest of my life, because I want to be able to tell you, hey, stay away from him, don't do this, and you just trust me.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever told me not to hug? Because you got people.
I told you to watch out about that little dude that was coming to get that little Jerry curl all the time, but you kept on having him up in there. He was bringing you lunch. Now he's offering me lunch. I said, don't take the lunch. Brothers don't just bring lunch to people.
Oh,
honey. Oh, honey.
That's because you was coming to get curls back then. That's how we started.
No. But, and then he revealed himself, and you had to let him know, wait a minute. But your husband had already told you. I just left it alone. I just never was one of those real jealous type kinds of dudes, you know.
Yeah. We know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Broderick,
down.
I holds it down, Broderick. I represent. You know what I mean?
Why he represents?
Brother Javon and Brother Tony Harris. Look, I represent, man. I holds it down.
This is why this conversation needs to be had. Because a lot of times, you see, now we done went from man to macho man. What is it, man versus male? Yeah, man versus male. And this is not a man-woman conversation. We're talking about what is your response? Okay, let's go to the next question. Ooh.
Well, we have been sharing for a while, so we may need to come back and...
Okay, let's see. One more thing. We know we've been going a little bit. When your partner is sexual abused, just because a person discloses they have that, they have that issue, it does not mean they're ready to talk. Every time someone talks about their sexual abuse, it doesn't mean that they want to talk about it, they want to share. So you have to set the right atmosphere. Discuss it when they need to talk about it, and then don't make it a laughing matter. Even though I think sometimes we laugh out of fear of not knowing what to say, you may chuckle, you may giggle or something. You got to come back to that conversation and let them know, hey, this is a problem. What do you believe? Let me see. What do you believe it did to me? There are not women issues. These are men. Oftentimes, I want to say that men or women don't pay attention, mostly men. I was watching a TED Talk today, and this gentleman was talking about sexual abuse, and he said that he said sexual abuse would be totally different if men would listen. And I believe if men had paid more attention a long time ago, he said one thing that you all could do if you're at a car game or if you're having man time and some man say, yeah, I just took her and knocked her upside the head, that you ought to respond. You ought to put that guy in check. You ought to put, and not make it a joke, not take it lightly, or not get in the clan and just begin to laugh about it. And so I thought that was really good, the way he said. Another thing is, when we have been victimized, we cannot blame our companions and our relationships, even our mothers or our fathers who did not do the abuse. We cannot blame it on that person. I wanted to, this is one thing he said on TED Talks. He said when you first talk about abuse, he said, John beat Mary. Then the conversation goes, Mary was beaten by John. Then it goes, Mary was beating. Then it was Mary was battered. Married is a battered woman. Now John has left the building. See, we start with the person that done it, then pretty soon is that, Sheila's been abused, but they never really talk about that abuser. So we have to put the problem where it is. And most of you out there, not all of you, but most of you, most of our families, most of our friends want to kill the messenger. They want to kill the people that is trying to expose this. Kill the messenger, not the person that did it. Men could be heard saying things like stand with women. Don't stand against them. Don't get into those clans where it's the man's club, and sort of be. What about all of our boys? Our boys have been traumatized. This is not a female or male problem anymore. Our boys are being traumatized. While you watching the little girl and protecting the girl, the boys being traumatized. Most of you men have women and girls that you care about. And so you really need to take these into consideration. Listen to your daughters. Watch their relationship. I remember one of my loved ones. I didn't know that she was getting beat up by a boy. Had no idea, and I'm not going to get into that because she may not want to talk about that, but we didn't have any idea. So don't be a stand-byer, and I'm going to let Pastor take it on. Anyone who is not a perpetrator, anyone can be a perpetrator. How do we support our friends? We need social change. We need leadership. Somebody's got to take responsibilities in your family to have this conversation instead of laughing about it. And silence is consentment, and we need to interrupt the silence conversation and let them be known, and let people know and let the world know that sexual abuse in any form is not acceptable.
I do want to say this as we get ready to close. I think we've still got to get another man up here. Let me tell you why. I am thankful for this, that I raised two daughters. We raised two daughters and three sons, and I don't ever remember having the urge to go peep in the bathroom at my daughters. I don't remember ever having the urge to want to be sexual with my daughters.
Yes,
so
yes.
What about the man that's feeling some impure thoughts concerning his own child? What do we need to say to that man? Because see, that's the thing. We need to maybe have some other men chime in, have Broderick in, and have some other men that have raised daughters, and we have beautiful daughters, but that is not so.
And I think men think it's because you all don't do it and he doesn't do it. The guys that you be around, they don't think they're doing it, but it's like 1 out of every 4 person is getting raped.
No, but I think it has a whole different psychological effect. I think the man that feels that way to his daughter feels like something's wrong with him, and that since something is wrong with me, they end up giving in to it. And they got to know that the only difference between me and men that don't do that to their daughters is that whenever the enemy try to bring that thought, it's ruled out. Devil, that's my child. Get out of here. And some men are thinking that, why is the enemy trying to bring this thought? And so now they need to hear from a man to say, yeah, I didn't wrestle with wanting to be affectionate with my daughters. It wasn't a fight at all. But you know what? The enemy would try to bring those thoughts to anyone, and just there are some men that are strong enough to know that's just Satan trying to destroy you. So we need to give some men some things right now, because there's a man that's planning to go and sneak in his daughter's room sometime this week. What can we say to that man if he's watching? To say, hey, bro, whoa, wait a minute. Do not yield to that temptation.
I think that's a whole nother subject, and you do need a man's table and a round table, Pastor, because you guys gonna have to get to the root of where that's coming from. Pornography,
I feel bad.
The desire, and get into the root of all these things. And you guys, you men have to have conversation. Women, we've been talking and chatting and crying and telling about it, and now you have a few men that are coming out. We need you to come on out and address this issue. And in our community, we need to stop saying people are weak because they talk about these things, or men are weak because they talk about sexual issues. And this is a whole nother table, and we're going to ask maybe Pastor and Broderick to get some guys up here and get with it. See you next week, 7 o'clock. I'm sorry I didn't read from the book. But what I will say, make sure if you like to order a book, just hit me up on Messenger and I'll get you a book out to you. And I was going to read from 127, page 127. And you need the book so you can go through with me. But thank you, Pastor. This was really great tonight. I appreciate you. I appreciate the man and the relationship that we have now. And God bless you. And thank you for loving me and loving all of me with all of my wonderful.
It takes a lot. Hey, thank you guys so much for joining us. Listen, I know we covered some things that are very controversial. We're going to go deeper. I don't know when Broderick and me and some other men are going to talk about some of these things, but it's coming. Stay tuned. Definitely want to get this book. Definitely want to inbox her, email her. The hotline number was on the screen. Hey, do whatever you need to do. And remember, we are going to re-air this so that it won't have all the interruptions. There was a storm going on, but it's coming again. Thank you, Pastor Sheila, for having me. Evangelist Sheila, I'm sorry. And we look forward to joining you again.
Thank you. Love you. God bless you. Thank you.